What's going on, guys? This is Rob. If you guys enjoy my content, make sure you hit the subscribe button and make sure you hit that little bell so you never miss out on my sexy voice. What's going on, guys? This is Rob. I think I'm going to go to the Ultra Music Festival. Actually, I'll probably do like Miami Music Week in March of 2019. And then I'm buying tickets for the Olympics in 2020 in Tokyo, Japan. I am excited for that. We doing this shit, baby. Anyway, we are covering Heroes in Crisis, DC's Heroes in Crisis event. So this is really like a highly anticipated event. Here's one of the things to bear in mind, guys. For those of you guys who are new to DC Comics, whenever a story with the word crisis gets thrown out of there, people initially basically think that it's going to be like a cosmic event, because historically speaking, that's always been the case. Like when it comes to these major cosmic events, really it started with Crisis on Infinite Earths, 0 Hour Crisis in Time, then it became Infinite Crisis, then Final Crisis, but you also had Identity Crisis in there, which was the first time that you had an event like that wasn't cosmic in scope, which means to say it didn't impact the entire universe, like it wasn't being destroyed or something along those lines. And this is another one. This Heroes in Crisis doesn't deal with like the end of the world. It actually deals with like how superheroes function and what they do when they're basically suffering from PTSD. And this is cool, because what this does is it initially picks up with Booster Gold, and there's really no better character to pick than like somebody like him that's dealing with, essentially like crisis level events. Because we know from the most recent story, for example, in Detective Comics, that Booster Gold had the idea to like save Batman, to basically like give him like the gift that Booster wanted to give Batman was like the perfect life. And so he went back in time and saved his parents from being killed, and that caused all kinds of problems, because then it turned out that like, his parents ended up being killed anyway. And so it's kind of crazy when it comes to Bruce Wayne's whole idea and Booster Gold trying to do the right thing and so on and so forth. And so what this does is it initially switches over to Harley Quinn. Now, these are a series of interviews that DC kind of throws in there for the purpose of establishing what Sanctuary is. Now, we know by definition from the various stories that we've seen that Sanctuary is where the heroes go when they're dealing with a crisis of sorts, when the overwhelming aspect of being a hero becomes too much for them to bear. Sanctuary is where they're supposed to go to, but it's largely been ambiguous up to this point. We didn't really know what Sanctuary was about. We didn't know if it was spearheaded by some doctor somewhere. We didn't really know if it was just an organization where superheroes just sit down and talk to other superheroes, and that's it. There is no exterior source out there. There's no doctors or, no medicine or anything like that. We didn't really know how that worked. And so Harley Quinn's interview here, I guess her talking point really just kind of comes with the nature of her character and saying that like she's familiar with trauma because she used to be like a psychologist or somebody that worked with individuals' minds. But as she began to go crazy by virtue of the Joker, she's kind of started to switch to this idea of simply saying like these people out there with all these problems, like we should just like smash them with a sledgehammer. We should just like get rid of them, which is kind of an extreme point. But she also kind of has a breakdown towards the end. And that's the cool thing about this, because you see this sort of systematic adjustment to her character. That first she starts off confident, then she starts to use comedy as a defense mechanism, and then she starts to get to like the inner part of herself, and then she starts to cry. And so it's really one of these moments where it's like her character being broken down. And it's one of these things where like all she needed to do was just talk. And so what this does is it jumps back over to Booster Gold. And it's kind of funny because in this initial segment, there was this, this diner woman who was like, hey, there's another hero here. And Booster's like, that's not a hero, that's a villain. It's like, well, is it going to be a fight? And he's like, yes, it's going to be a fight. And it's kind of a cool thing because the way this unfolds, the way that like Tom King does this is so cool. It's like a fight that's building to anticipation, because you're talking about like Harley Quinn showing up here on the scene, and then it's just kind of like, it's only a matter of time before they fight. Nobody else really seems to know. And even Booster Gold's aware this is going to turn into a fight. Harley Quinn's like, yeah, this is going to turn into a fight. And so it's really just kind of like, when do we strike? It's one of those classic sort of like Mexican standoff scenes, for example, from like, the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly at the end. The Mexican standoff scene that lasted like 10 minutes before anybody started shooting anybody else. It was kind of weird. But at this point, we switch over to Superman, and we kind of get Superman just sort of arriving on the scene for a particular location. Now, again, the invocation of Superman in this story means that we're not dealing with like small beans here, that we're dealing with a pretty significant event. And so from here, we jump over to a guy named Blue Jay. Now, Blue Jay was a character who was originally introduced back in 1971 in Justice League of America, issue number 87, I'm pretty sure, and he was created by Michael Friedrich. Now, with regards to his character, he's kind of like Ant-Man in the sense that like he can shrink down. The difference is that he grows wings when he shrinks. But the funny thing about this is that he really just kind of says like I can control my power under normal circumstances. I'm very good at it, but as time has progressed, I seem to have lost control of my power. And so it's one of these things where it sort of feels like he has like a mental block in place. Now, Blue Jay is a pretty small time guy. I mean, he's not a big superhero, which is probably why you've never heard of him. He's small fish. But the cool thing about this is this kind of, Tom King telling us that the struggle of being a superhero isn't relegated to just the big guys, right? It's not like, the struggle of being Superman, the struggle of being Batman or Wonder Woman or Aquaman or something like that. It affects everybody in some form or fashion, big and small, which is actually a pretty cool idea. It's very akin to like Civil War from Marvel Comics, those of you guys who read that, where you basically had like everybody from the top, the big guys, Captain America, Iron Man, so on, all the way down to the bottom with like heroes for hire who were basically experiencing this rift in the superhero community. So it's kind of a cool concept. But from here, of course, the fight breaks out between Harley Quinn and Booster Gold, and it goes exactly as you would expect it to. I mean, for the most part, Booster's able to hold his own, but Harley Quinn's driven by absolute insanity and madness. And so when she starts lashing out, it's just kind of like, look, she's not going to stop here. I mean, she's just sort of lost her mind in the moment. And so what we end up doing is switching over to Batman, to Superman, and to Wonder Woman. Now, this is basically the Trinity that we're dealing with here. And that really seems to be what the story's boiling down to in a lot of ways. Can we also just say here, this is an amazing drawing. Clay Mann's the one who's doing like the art for the comic, and it looks amazing. Like, I would want this framed without the speech bubbles. Like, just the picture and no speech bubbles. Dude, I would love that. Like, have that and frame it in my house. It would be amazing. Anyway, with the Trinity of DC Comics, it's one of the important things. When you're talking about what's basically a whodunit murder mystery, the Trinity is oftentimes invoked more than anybody else. And the reason why we call them the Trinity is because they're kind of like the if there was such a thing, the 1-2-3 punch of DC Comics, really the comic book industry. Batman, of course, is the original anti-hero, Superman's the original superhero, and Wonder Woman is the original, like, female empowered superhero. And so you take all three of these things, and it's like, these are the top three heroes that DC has. But them arriving at Sanctuary is predicated on the idea that someone's been going around and killing superheroes. That you basically end up having like this field full of bodies. You've got like, some of whom are small time guys, some of whom are pretty big guys, but they've all basically been killed off. And so what we end up doing is having Superman enter into this house, only for us to find the two biggest players in the DC universe so far who have been killed off: Arsenal, Red Arrow, and the red-haired Wally West. And this is actually pretty big, because the question is, who the hell killed him? Like, it's doing this is it's kind of crazy the way Tom King does this, because you could take it a couple different ways. The fact that it's just kind of like Wally and Arsenal are confirmed dead. Like, you would think it would be like a big dramatic moment when like you end up finding out they're dead, but it's just kind of like, yep, they're dead alongside everybody else, is kind of the feeling that you get. But what this also seems to point at is that this is indicative of a much bigger picture. There's something far more significant going on here. The deaths of these characters alongside all these other, essentially small-time superheroes is really designed to say that their deaths are a byproduct of somebody out there being vengeful or what have you, but they're all superheroes. That at the end of the day, Wally West's Arsenal are really no different from all the other heroes who are out there, regardless of how small they are. They all fight crime, they all try to beat the bad guys, and they all struggle with being a superhero in their own way. That they all have their own desires, their own motivations, all the things that they regret and they suffer from. And so that's kind of the crazy scenario, is because what we're basically told here is that Sanctuary was set up by like Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman as a place for superheroes to deal with like the process of struggling, to deal with what it means to be a hero, to deal with like the emotional toll that it takes, which is pretty cool because that's something you never really see in DC Comics, or really in comic books as a whole. And in reality, that's just a holdover from the Silver Age. That's just a holdover from like 1950s comic books. That back in the day, you had superheroes who fought the bad guys, and the superheroes beat the bad guys, and then the day was done, and that was it. And you might see some emotional struggle in their comics with regards to like the loss of something. For example, 1971, Peter Parker loses Gwen Stacy. 1972, I think it was, Eobard Thawne killed Iris West, and so Barry Allen went out and killed Eobard Thawne. I mean, you have like these moments where it kind of impacts the characters, but no one's ever really dealt with the idea of like, when the hero saves the day, who saves the hero? That's the question that none of the comic book companies ever really dealt with before. And so it's really, really cool to see this happen. And so it's almost kind of crushing, because it almost seems as though the entire basis behind Sanctuary is sort of all for naught. That these people were all brought here to find a place of solace, to find a place of comfort, to find a place of healing, and instead they found death. And so it's pretty sad to see. And so switching over to Harley and Booster Gold, it's one of these things where they sort of have this conversation back and forth, and Booster Gold starts making allusions to the idea, and then actually makes kind of an outright statement that Harley Quinn was the one who killed everyone. And that's what's so crushing, is it's like, you went there and you killed every single person. And Harley Quinn says, no, I didn't kill anybody. I'm not the one who's responsible for everyone dying here. The person who's responsible for that, Booster, is you. And so basically we get this kind of transition to Booster Gold himself, where he's doing his interview, and he's saying like, I know exactly what you guys are are about, which makes sense because he's from the future. But he's like, I know exactly what you guys are about. I know exactly what you guys do. You guys are an organization that essentially like the overseers, the ones that help the superheroes get through their crises, are essentially robots built on Kryptonian tech that are a combination of Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman's personalities. And so Booster Gold simply says, yeah, like, I'm here to start talking, like, I'm here for help. And so it leaves things very, very ambiguous because we don't really know what involvement Booster Gold had here. We don't really know if he outright killed everyone, if he set in motion a set of events that led to all their deaths, if it's some villain that Booster Gold set off by virtue of being there and talking to them or something like that. We don't really know. And that's one of the cool things here, is there's so many possibilities. It's entirely possible that this organization, Sanctuary, will eventually go awry, that we'll basically see what amounts to like a small-time future's end, where you end up having like these Kryptonian robots that take over the bodies of the superheroes and try to destroy the world. There's any number of things that could play out in this scenario. So it's pretty interesting, and it's actually pretty cool, and it works pretty well because, of course, it creates a lot of anticipation for the next issue. But with that being said, guys, we're going to bring this video to an end. If you are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like, and I will catch you all later. Peace.